Welcome in, everyone. You're listening to Bulls Central. I'm joined with me today by a very special guest. You know him for his great work as the host of the Bulls Talk podcast, also co-host of the Sports Adjacent podcast. I'll leave a link to both of those down in the description. The Bulls Talk podcast, one of my go-tos for all Bulls-related content. It's my pleasure to welcome back to the show Tony Gill of NBC Sports Chicago. Tony, how we doing, man? It's great to have you back on.
Yo, Jamal, what's up, man? Yeah, I'm glad to look. This is one of my favorite ones to listen to and join. In terms of Bulls fan, I try and go through the ringer, no pun intended, of Bulls content, around because I just enjoy just people talking about and being passionate about their favorite team and my favorite team to watch. So, yeah, I'm glad that you sent me that DM, and I'm glad to be back.
For sure, man. Always. I'm always looking forward to bringing you guys on. Be sure to give Tony a follow, by the way, at the Tony Gill. Is that correct? Yep. Like I said, be sure to check out all the great work him, Casey, Jason, they're doing over at NBC Sports Chicago and the Bulls Talk podcast. They're actually going to be doing a live show, guys, by the way, at Bulls Fest this weekend, Saturday, if I'm not mistaken, where they're going to be interviewing GM Mark Eversley. I'll actually be in attendance watching on, so be sure to be there if you're going to be at Bulls Fest. It's kind of rare these days that we get to hear from the Bulls front office. They kind of like to go a little quiet when the fans are growing a little frustrated. So I'm actually very curious to see what Mark has to say. You're going to be asking all the tough questions, right, Tony?
Yeah. He doesn't have to see me all the time. So I get to the fun job of asking all the hard-hitting questions.
Right.
That Jason and Casey may not necessarily have the bandwidth to ask, but I'm gonna be like, hey man, like the Bulls suck, what's going on?
Well, if you're taking questions, though, I've got one from Mark. I mean, as you know, the team is going to be they're running this team back. We already know that, right? They re-signed most of the free agents. They added Carter, Craig. You'd have to think that they're going to be doing what they did last year and trying to push this group to win now. So I guess how are they, meaning AKA Mark Eversley, how are they going to be measuring success this season? Like where does this team have to finish in order for them to call this a success before they pivot in another direction? And the reason I ask that is because, last offseason, AK mentioned going into the upcoming season that they need to be better in order for them to be considered the season a success. They had to be better in both the regular season and the playoffs. And obviously they didn't do that. They missed the playoffs and finished below 500. So how are they measuring success now that we have seen regression from this team? And I guess I'll just turn that question over to you. How do you think the front office should be measuring success for this upcoming year?
I think that is a very interesting question. And that question is probably going to come up repeatedly before the start of the season. And I think they're going to be a bit more vague than last year, right? Yeah. Because of what happened last year and what they said last year, right? When this question was broached to them to start at Media Day, Arturis was saying we got to be better than what we did last year, which was they got into the playoffs, first round exit, won one game, and everybody took that as okay, you want to win a round and go to the second round of the playoffs, which was not disputed by anybody, which was brought up again at the halfway mark, that they didn't, step back from. So I'm interested to see if they still have that confidence that they can take that next step into second roundum, if that's the next step for this team, and if that's what they foresee. I'm very much interested if they are able to stand on that, and continue that pursuit. And that's two things, right? Like one, you want your team to pursue better, right? But do they have confidence in the returning players and these that they have overcome their offensive struggles with their best three players? Like there's a lot that goes into what is better and what's going to get them better into that place. So I'll be very much interested to see what they say and how vague it is, considering basically a failure that they didn't accomplish what they set out to do last year.
Well, I'm almost wondering if now they're going to consider even just making it to the playoffs a success. You actually said something recently on the Bulls Talk podcast. I can't remember which one it was. It was about, like your biggest concern for the Bulls going into the season, how depending on how the season goes, we might still see a lack of direction going into next offseason. Say they do better, but not exceptionally better. They're not still a title contending team, but say they make the playoffs, maybe they get beat in the first round. It ends up becoming enough of for the front office to justify keeping this group around, clinging to this idea of continuity. In that instance, maybe they bring DeMar back. But I'm curious, what would you want to see them do, or see them do? Say the season goes okay, but it's clearly they're not a title contending team. What would you want to see them do?
I mean, it's interesting because like my original thought of what they should do is what I thought that they were going to do in terms of the slow build up a solid foundation, how to play, of young players, of a culture that they can begin with from the ground up, which I think Bulls fans would have given them that room to do so. And in so many words, continue to build through the draft. But they didn't do that. So now we're in this space where they're, hype, ready to go. They're pushing the pedal to the metal. From that plateau, I guess what I want them to do is figure out who are going to be the mainstay guys for the next 4 years, and truly do that, right? Like if it's DeMar, if you want to double down on that, like I don't like the middling, right?
Yeah.
Go into the tax. If you really believe in this team, do what you have to do. It's okay, so you want this team, but you don't really want to go all in on this team, right? It's like double down. And I get it, right? There's no point to it. Looking at this roster, you don't believe in this roster that they're going to be title contending, which kind of makes the question, then what is the point? What are you doing around here? You just want to poke around and see what happens and hope there's injuries or something around the league that'll help push you to, a conference finals or a finals visit. There's too many extra curricular things happening that you hope to happen around the Bulls that don't necessarily have to do with the Bulls, which I don't think is the best strategy to build a championship window. If you're hoping for other teams' injuries, or if you're hoping for a certain seed where you can possibly sneak in depending on the matchups, I don't think that's the proper way to build. Like you got to start in really truly internalizing the issues that you have, in order to say, hey, we're going to put out the best product possible, to actually open up that winning window, versus hoping that this group who hasn't shown you much, in terms of the continuity of winning, that they haven't shown, is just, I would prefer them to look. What are you doing with Zach LaVine? If that's going to probably be the linchpin of all of this, that will set the direction. If you're going to keep Zach LaVine, keep him away from all these rumors and stuff, and say we're going to start everything with Zach LaVine, truly, not with older guys, not with a mix of is Zach LaVine the best player? Is somebody else? If Zach LaVine is truly your number one guy, then make him the number one guy, right? Set a pecking order. This probably means you're not re-signing DeMar DeRozan. But again, like we mentioned on the Bulls Talk podcast before, we see that happening, of DeMar DeRozan making a return to this team. So I am very interested in seeing how they move about after this season. But you're right. My number one fear is they just kind of, we didn't do that bad last year. And that's the mentality or the focus to keep this going. But I would like to see something done, either with a personal statement or with a statement to Zach LaVine where he feels confident that he's here for the long haul, or trade Zach LaVine, redo this whole thing, figure out what you're going to do from there.
If you had to choose between those options, what would you prefer? Because I think, if I remember correctly, you said a while back, and it actually really hit home with me, because I was like, oh, that's a really good point. I think it was something around, can you envision, I know I'm butchering it, you'll probably remember, can you envision Zach LaVine being here when the team wins a championship during these next, while he's still under contract? If not, then what are you doing? Right. So I guess what would be your ideal between trading Zach or keeping him around and saying, you are the guy, we're building around you, you're going to be the best player?
If it was me, I think the answer is fairly simple. I mean, if you can't see him winning a championship under this deal, there's no reason to have him here. I'm all about doing whatever it takes. Whatever move you make, does it get you closer to winning a championship? And I stole that from Dan Bernstein of 670 The Score. He said that a while back. Just about any sport, right?
Yeah, no,
any
it's true.
GM of any sport, does this move get us closer to winning a championship, or does it get us closer to hitting a wall?
Right.
You have to decide that. And I think up to this point, when you look at the terms of this deal and the length of Zach LaVine's deal, you have to be realistic and say, we weren't ready when we decided to make that trade for Vooch. We weren't ready as an organization to make that move to championship status or championship contending. You can argue, and I've seen a lot of Bulls fans say this, you can argue that the hiring of Billy Donovan kind of made people a little bit iffy about how they wanted to build a championship team, considering what Billy Donovan has done at the professional level. He's done a lot of winning in the regular season. Right. But when in terms of building something that has legit winning, he's had better players. He's had 2 top 5 players, and he couldn't get it done there. So if you have lesser players, he's supposed to make that work. Like I don't get the thought process. So my thought and my choice probably would be to trade Zach LaVine while he's on this deal as the money. We just saw what Jaylen Brown got. Right. You look comparatively, they're basically almost the same player, Jaylen Brown and Zach LaVine, and you got Zach on this nice deal. That's what it looks like now.
A nice contract, right?
Right now, it looks like a nice contract. So I would say, look, there's going to be suitors. There's going to be people. There's a reason why Zach LaVine's name keeps coming up. It's because the rest of the league knows what the Bulls, I don't think, want to admit. You aren't going to win anything. So we're just going to hover around like sharks waiting for this to implode and see if we can get the big chunk of meat, which is Zach LaVine.
Yeah, the teams are waiting for a fire sale, right? Mm-hmm. Like they're expecting that from the Bulls. Now, the offseason isn't over. There's obviously the potentially 2 remaining roster spots, depending on what the Bulls do with Carlik Jones. What's been the biggest surprise for you so far this offseason?
As much as negativity I've been saying so far on this team, I do like the acquisitions of Jevon Carter and Torrey Craig. They are winning players. They fill the needs that the Bulls have where they don't hinder you defensively. They're very versatile defenders, can guard 1, 2, maybe 3 positions each. And also offensively, they feel the need of the 3-point shooting. And on top of that, role playing, right? I think that's the biggest issue or one of the biggest issues for the Bulls is defining roles on this team where everybody feels like they're contributing in what they do to the winning. Yeah. The matching of DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine, and Nikola Vucevic has been an issue offensively of trying to find what works and something that pleases all 3 of them, which, look, unless somebody takes a step back role-wise and feel comfortable in that, I don't see that, working out for the long term. But I like those acquisitions. They're veteran players. They've been a part of a couple winning situations. Obviously, Torrey Craig with the Phoenix Suns and Jevon Carter with the Milwaukee Bucks. So they have an idea of what it's supposed to look like. So hopefully their presence in the locker room, there could be some actual real leadership and accountability for everybody on this roster. Hopefully, I mean, I don't want to bring them into it, but you see what happens with the White Sox, right? In terms of how they chose to go about building their culture and leadership and all that. I don't want that to happen for the Bulls. Somebody needs to hold everybody from a player standpoint accountable for everything that happens, right? We don't want any more in-season blow-ups, right? Where, players that aren't on the team anymore, have to say things, to the star players and to the rest of this team to get going. So I do like those acquisitions. So in terms of off-season moves, I'm not surprised, but I am happy that those 2 players are the first 2 that they wanted to bring in.
One of the things I was surprised by was that the Bulls were actually able to re-sign all of the guys that they wanted, right? Vooch, Coby, Io. Again, something we really didn't think was possible with the Bulls going into the luxury tax, that they wanted to be able to keep all of them, but they were able to do it, which is great. Which of these was, in your view, the best signing, and which was maybe sort of the biggest head scratcher?
No, Coby, definitely.
As far as the best signing or the head
Yeah,
scratcher?
the best signing.
Yeah.
I thought Coby should be their first priority in bringing on who to bring back. Obviously, outside of Vooch, right? Coby was the one that I thought saw the most growth out of all the players. And when you look at the numbers, you don't really see that comparatively from, his rookie year, where, the scoring output or something like that. But you really saw him round out his game as a basketball player. Defensively, you saw him getting over screens, being able to call out things. I believe that there's one play where he's like pushing Zach in a direction where he's supposed to go defensively. That's something that I always remember. I was like, oh, he knows what he's doing out there, defensively, and felt confident enough to start directing people on where to go defensively. You saw the ball handling improve, right? He wasn't getting pickpocketed like, Jaylen Brown, right? Where you saw that growth in the ball handling.
Right.
The passing, him seeing the lanes when he drives. He's not just putting his head down and trying to get to the rim. He's looking and being able to see the floor as a passer. So Coby White was probably the one that I was like most like, yes, he, in terms of whatever happens, right? If he's a starter or he's a six man, having Coby White on your team was, I think, a great acquisition, or a great person to keep on the roster. The head scratcher one was Io, mainly because you keep Coby, you go out and get Jevon Carter, you already have Alex Caruso on the team. Where does Io play? And look, going small only helps when everybody or the majority of the players out there are decent enough three-point shooters and can guard at least bigger than themselves. I don't know where Io plays, and we'll see in camp. We'll see how that goes. Billy only plays what?
8-9 guys.
9 players.
Yeah.
Is he going to be able to crack that rotation with 2 addition of a wing, right, in Torrey Craig, and a guard, but also can guard wings in Jevon Carter? Where does he go? Where does he play? Where are the minutes for Io? And if that's the case, are you just doing it just because you said you wanted to bring everybody back? But yeah, it's going to be tough to see him cracking that rotation continually, on top of Dalen Terry, who we still don't know can play basketball, and Julian Phillips, who the Bulls just drafted this year, who went into the draft to get. So there's going to be a lot of questions about this rotation and who plays, considering that they can't be trying to grow people anymore.
Yeah.
Right. Like they have to win basketball games now. They're not they can't be splitting the difference. Like that's the worst thing, right? If either you're developing into something or you're trying to win basketball games at the present moment, you can't be doing both as this Bulls organization has tried to do. Like, you need guys that are ready to play, ready to contribute right now. And I don't know if Io is going to be able to crack that rotation on a consistent basis. So that's probably my head scratcher if I had to pick one.
Yeah, it would be mine too. And also just from the contract amount, not saying that it was necessarily an overpay, because when you look at it in the grand scheme of things, it's actually a pretty relatively cheap deal, but it was more so, well, who are they really competing against, right? Was Io going to be getting that contract from another team? It wasn't like he received that offer and then the Bulls matched it to keep him. That was the offer, right? At least based on what we know. That was sort of my biggest thing. I was like, yeah, they paid Io that much. Like, probably could have just gotten him on the qualifying offer and see how he does. But that was the biggest head scratcher for me. I do still have high hopes for Io, though. You know, I mean, like we saw him do well in his rookie year. He has potential. I think it's just a matter of realizing that potential. Very similar to, Patrick Williams. You see the skills and the intangibles there. It's just a matter of actually having the confidence to be able to bring that out. Who are you looking forward to seeing most this season? Not necessarily from who's going to be the most fun to watch, but more so seeing how they meet expectations, maybe a surprise player or someone you're intrigued by.
I know this is probably easy to say, but I got a couple questions about DeMar DeRozan.
Oh, okay.
And I get it. He's probably been their most consistent player, but here's why. One, he's not slowing down anytime soon. He's going to be looking for a contract, and the team that can offer him probably the biggest contract is the Bulls. He's been a 2-time All-Star, and if he's heading that direction, which probably he will, right? If he takes care of his body, he's always working on his game individually. There's going to be some questions on, all right, we know that last year their emphasis was trying to be less predictable on how they play offense, trying to get more guys involved on the offense to be more of a team play basketball style. And they tried that, and then it reverted back to, the star players doing what they felt comfortable doing. And again, they had great individual seasons, but it didn't help the team overall in the way they played offensive basketball. So if this is the last year under this deal with DeMar DeRozan, is he going to continue to be DeMar DeRozan, which, hey, I get buckets, I know what I do, nobody has the resume that I have, so I'm just going to continue to do what I'm doing and be another all-star so I can get, this check? Or is there really going to be a change in how they play offensive basketball, where they're not leaning so much on DeMar mid-range jump shots? I get it. It's a skill. He's very efficient at it, but overall, it hasn't won you enough basketball games. You made the playoffs one time. That has to say something. And you can say, well, it's not my fault. I'm 2-time All-Star. But is your individual success hindering the team success? There should be a real question. What are we doing here? Are we really trying to do this? Are we really trying to win basketball games? Or I only want to win under my terms. I only want to win up until a point until I have to sacrifice numbers or stuff like that. So can the two find a middle ground where DeMar can still be the best that DeMar can be, and the team success can, in terms of how they play basketball offensively, can they find a way to mesh? And I think that's the biggest question for me, because as we've seen since he's been here, DeMar kind of dictates everything that happens on the offensive end when he's on the court, which is the majority of the time. So if Billy Donovan isn't going to implement a style, which again, we haven't seen that from Billy. He's leaning towards his offensive stars, the majority of his career. I'm very interested to see how that plays out, that dynamic plays out from DeMar's standpoint, or is it just going to be the same?
So it's interesting. When you said, easy answer, I assumed it was going to be Patrick Williams. Most people, it's like, oh, I'm very excited to see what Patrick's going to do, this year. We're hoping for a breakout year. DeMar is an interesting one, though. What I would like to see, because we know he can do it, is be a better playmaker. Not saying that he hasn't been the last 2 years, right? But that final year that he had with the Spurs, where he was, I think top 10 in the league in assists, but still was able to score over 20 points per game. But it wasn't like, the number of shot attempts that he was putting up, that he's been doing with Chicago. That's what I would like to see. And taking a different role that's maybe a bit more deferential. Like you said, though, I think it's a matter of, is Billy Donovan going to tell him, hey, this is the role that we need you to play? And is he going to have, the confidence to be able to tell him that? Because everyone always says, Billy Donovan, it just kind of goes with whatever the Stars want to do. And that's sort of it. He benched Zach LaVine that one game. I think it was against Orlando. He went 2 for 14, and, Zach barked back about it. Right. And he's still kind of upset about it to this day. When Billy Donovan does do stuff like that, his Stars don't appreciate it. So I am curious, actually.
Like that. when he made the move, I was like, oh, okay, let's go.
Yeah.
Like for that that game in a vacuum, right? Like Zach was playing awful.
No, he deserved to be benched. Yeah.
Right. He that's a rare game for Zach Levine,
Mm-hmm.
but for a team that needs to win every game, that was the best move. And they almost won that game.
Yeah, they almost came back and won.
Yeah. But for him not to stick on it and not be able to explain that and have the confidence, like you mentioned, I made the right basketball decision there. Yeah. For us to win that game, are you going to tell me that you were helping out? Like, look at the film. They're going to watch film. And I'm not saying embarrass him in front of the team, but I'm saying take him to the side, watch this tape. What were you doing there to help us? Defensively, he was bad. Offensively, he was terrible. Like, we know that's not him, but for that game, what else can Zach Levine do to help you win? And he wasn't doing it.
Yeah.
And that's when I realized, I'm like, oh, well, Billy Donovan's not going to be here when they start winning championships. Because it's like, if you can't stand, you think Popovich or the winning coaches that actually win would have been like that? Like, no. And that's why you are where you are, is who's there to make the tough decision and stick on the tough decision if it's the right decision.
What also surprised me about that game, though, was Zach's response to it. I mean, I think there is something to be said about having a little bit of self-awareness, right? It's like, I didn't play well that game. Maybe I should have been benched in the fourth quarter, rather than, everything he said about, that's Billy's decision. He's going to have to sit on it. It's like, I don't know. That kind of rubbed me the wrong way as well. But I agree.
Yes. Oh, man. I was like, you serious? And then I was like, he has all the aesthetics of a superstar player.
Right.
But all the stuff that actually makes you a winning player, like all these players laud Coby, right? But actually don't do none of this Coby stuff. Right. Where take personal accountability for the play of your team. If this is your team, right? If you have to take ownership and take accountability, if you want to be that leader and that guy for all the stuff that happens under your watch. It's not just, it's a risk and you take all the jabs when you take that lead, but you also get all the praise and all the glory and all the other stuff when it goes right, because you're taking the accountability for not only your play, but the play of your team.
Exactly.
Who does that on the Bulls?
That's part of the problem, right? You need players like that, right? And you need a leader that is going to stand up and take responsibility, take accountability. I mean, hopefully they'll get that to an extent with
Carter
and Craig, but they're not going to be the main guys, right?
Yeah, look what they're making. Stars. Like Jason Goff always say, look where the money is.
Yeah,
how much as much as we want Torrey Craig and Javon Carter to say something, how much are they going to be able to?
Yeah,
are they going to listen?
Yeah.
So
I'll get you out of here on this one, and it's more of a obligatory question. That might be a dumb question, but it's just because it's in the news. So James Harden, we obviously learned this morning, not going to play for the Sixers. Called Daryl Morey a liar. Has no desire to play for the team, even though the Sixers are saying, "Hey, we still expect you to show up to camp." Of course, Bulls Twitter goes crazy. Let's get James Harden. Let's trade DeMar DeRozan for him. Thoughts?
I don't want James Harden anywhere near anything that I enjoy or like.
100% agree with you.
Like I don't understand why any winning organization would want James Harden.
Yeah.
It's just too many other factors there, and I think he has a pattern. I just look, if you want to be relevant, I guess, but I hate build a team just to be relevant. Like if I was a GM or executive, it's like I'm trying to be the Spurs. I'm trying to be the Heat. I'm trying to be teams that, even though you have those lulls, right, those bad down seasons, but I want people to recognize what the standard here.
Right.
And if you're trying to build that, I don't know why you want James Harden.
Yeah.
At this point, he's past his prime. He requires a lot of hand-holding and attention and pleasing at this point, in his career. James Harden's a first ballot Hall of Famer. I do not doubt that. He's one of the greatest to play that position. One of the greatest scorers ever. I do not want James Harden on the Chicago Bulls. It just doesn't make any sense. Yeah. I think you find yourself, especially what he's looking for, like if you're trading for him, you're going to sign him to a long-term deal.
You have to pay him, right? Yeah.
Right. And what does that do for you? You're essentially in the same spot, maybe even worse.
Yeah.
Off if you give up assets to acquire him. So no, it makes zero sense for the Bulls to do that. I think it makes the problem worse.
Yeah.
And I get that move gets you further away from an NBA championship. I think.
Yeah. I mean, I get it, sure. Better 3-point shooting, right? Bulls need that. Obviously Harden is still, pretty good playmaker. I think he led the league in NBA in assists last year.
Yep.
But I mean, yeah, I'm 100% in agreement. James Harden, I don't want anything to do with him as far as him being in a Bulls uniform. I mean, the other thing I think people aren't really considering from a Bulls fan perspective, of the few that actually want this to happen, Daryl Morey's not going to want DeMar DeRozan. I mean, like based on like how he views analytics, like, 3-point shot or you're doing layups. That's his ideal. That's like, his nightmare, a guy that just is a high volume mid-range jump shooter. So yeah, I don't see it happening, but I know that it's blowing up on Twitter today, so I thought I'd ask it since I've got you on.
No, like stop, please stop.
Anyway, Tony, as always, man, I really appreciate you making the time. It means a lot to me. Looking forward to seeing you at Bulls Fest, and keep up the great work on the pod as well.
Yeah, I assume you're like 7'2", so.
Why do you assume that?
Yeah, I don't know. You just on screen, you just look like a very tall person.
I'm not 7'2", but I'm 6'2".
Oh, okay, yeah, it's still pretty tall. Like I told on people on the Bulls Talk, I was like, "Hey, KC's taller than what you guys think.
KC's a tall man.
I'm shorter. Yeah. I'm a lot shorter than what.
Yeah, okay.
Think. So, I'm pushed. Well, I guess I'm might be a little bit above human average. So I'm like 5'9". I'm just getting the 5'9".
KC played college basketball, though, right? Like,
yeah.
He's a big guy. When I met him for the first time, I was like, oh, this dude's huge. And then I realized, he was actually playing, a college basketball for a period of time. So it makes sense.
Yeah. So
anyway, man.
Excited for Saturday. Excited to meet you in person. So sure. Yeah, it's gonna be a fun time.
For sure, man. Sounds good. I'm looking forward to it.